All right, it took us 3 videos, but here we are. We're now moving into our unit, our stuff on string. We're going to get introduced to string. You've kind of been introduced to string already, but we're really going to get into it. We'll take a glance at the string API and then talk about a couple of string methods. In Java, every variable's data type is either one of the 8 primitive data types or a type of object. Before I show you the next slide, see if you can name the 8 primitive data types. You don't have to. I'm only asking that you know 4. But here's all 8. And I've actually organized them based on their capacity. A Boolean only takes up 1 bit because it's either a 0 or a 1. It's either true or false. All right, all the way up to double. Double takes up 8 bytes of data. And keep in mind that the amount of capacity, the amount of space it takes up, directly affects the number range. Right? We talked about overflow and a couple of units ago, and that's directly related to the amount of space it takes up. Not super important right now. String, meaning a string of characters, is a type of object. Generally speaking, objects, we know scanner, we know random, we now know string, begin with capital letters, while primitive data types begin with lowercase letters. This is a convention. Okay, this isn't syntax. You don't have to start objects with a capital letter, but we always tend to, and that is why you see these begin with a capital letter. Objects are able to perform actions. That is, they can execute commands by invoking methods. Invoking a method is known as a method call. So objects can call methods. For example, scanner is able to call methods, right? We've done this before. We've created scanner. In this example, I'm creating a scanner called input. And then a little bit later, we're saying input dot next double. This is a method call. Calling a method has its own syntax. You're going to have the object, or more precisely, the object variable. You're going to have the little dot operator, also known as the method selector. And then you got the method that you're calling, right? Input dot next int is an example of that. Notice that we got the parentheses, which is the possibility for us to pass in some inputs, some arguments, some parameters. Next int is an example of a method call that doesn't need any additional input. In this syntax, object is the name of the object, or more precisely, the object variable. Before instructing an object to call a method, you'll need to make one first. Right? In the case of scanner, we always made input before doing something like nextInt. In the case of random, we would always make randy before doing something like nextInt in order to generate a random number. The same is going to be kind of true for string. This construction statement, that is in quotes, this is a Mr. Hubbard word. This construction statement shows that a string object can be constructed in a manner similar to other objects such as scanner and random, right? Take a look at all these examples. Left-hand side, we actually have variable declaration. I'm creating a scanner variable called input. I'm creating a random variable called randy, right? These are data types. Over on the right-hand side is where we're actually creating the object. Right? It's a scanner object, a random object, a string object. And then this, of course, is just the variable name, input randy str. So this is very similar to how we made objects with scanner and random. In this above example, we're constructing a new string with the contents hello world and saving it into a string variable called str. However, strings are so common that most programming languages provide a shortcut syntax to construct a string. Right? We've never actually seen this. We've worked with strings a little bit, but we've never done this. You can do this. No one does, because almost all programming languages have this little shortcut syntax where you can just skip a little bit, put the stuff in quotes, and that will construct the strings. Behind the scenes, what's happening is this. Right? This is happening behind the scenes whenever you do this. The text inside double quotes is known as a string literal. Right? This is the string literal inside the quotes. This is a string variable. Variables, as the name kind of suggests, can change over time. But whenever we put this thing in quotes, it is literally that. You're somewhat familiar with this with a number literal, right? 7 is an integer. It is a number literal. But integer x is a variable. Strings can be pieced together with other strings or primitive variables / values using the addition operator. Right here I have a string variable hello, and it is going to have the contents, this string literal, hello, comma, space. Note that the space is inside the quotes, and that registers, right? This is part of the string. String world is going to have this contents. We then say string greeting is the addition of those things. Because this isn't in quotes, we're going to look for these variables. Hello has these contents. World has these contents. So we're going to put those together. And then in the final line here, I'm printing them off just to kind of show the effect. We have those two strings pieced together. Right. Our slide previously said that you could do other variables or values. Here I have string age, and that is equal to this string literal plus 16. 16 is an integer, right? So I am piecing together a string and an integer, right? This is going to, the addition here is going to force this to be a string, which we're saving into age. And if I were to print this, we see that there. Okay, over here, this is just showing that true, it's not in quotes, so it's not the string true. This is a Boolean value. The process of adding strings together is known as concatenation. Fancy word, I don't know why, but that's what it is. Okay, with that in mind, we're going to head over to CodingBat, knock out hello name under the string one section. All right, got CodingBat ready to go. Before you tackle this, don't forget to sign in if you're not already signed in so that it'll save your progress. But this string one section is where we're headed. And we're going to do hello name. It says, given a string, example Bob, return a greeting in the form of hello space Bob exclamation mark. Right? So here we see our examples. We're going to have the method call hello name. And in this example, they're passing in Bob. This should return hello space Bob with an exclamation mark. Hello name Alice should give us hello space Alice with an exclamation mark. So your output varies based on this input, right? And this method call, I should say in this method call, X is going to come in and it is going to be treated as name inside of our method definition. Note that it is a string. Note that our return type is also a string. So ultimately we need to return a string. Okay. I'm going to do kind of a level 0 approach. I'm going to create a string here. And what we're going to do is create the string literal hello space. Right? Notice that the space is again inside the quotes. That is part of the string. And you'll notice that we actually want it. We want hello space in each of these outputs. I'm then going to add name. Right? So in the case of Bob, it should say hello space Bob. Okay, I thought about maybe going ahead and returning that, but I'm going to show you the next part. Don't forget, there's actually an exclamation mark on the other side. Right? That's not part of the name variable coming in. It's up to us to actually add that on to concatenate. So here we go. I am creating a string variable called str, and it will be equal to this string literal plus this string variable plus this string literal. We're going to concatenate all that together. That gets saved into str. At the very end, I'm going to return. Keep in mind, we do have to return something. We have to return a string. I'm going to return str. I'm going to hit the go button. We'll scroll over and see that we killed it. Okay. That's a level 0. There's really only like one level higher than this because this problem is so simple. But we're creating a string variable, saving this thing in, and then returning the string variable. When realities are, we could actually do all of this just at the point of return. I don't need the variable, right? We don't change the variable in any way. We just use it to save. And instead, what I'm going to do is just produce the string. I'm going to concatenate at the point of return. So this will get all added together. It'll make the string that we want like hello space Bob exclamation mark, then that string gets returned. I'm going to hit the go button again to show you that we once again have them all correct. Okay. Looking at our slides, they want us to move on to the next one. And by they, I mean me, because I made the slides. Given two strings, A and B, return the result of putting them together in the order A, B, B, A. Example, hi and bye returns hi, bye, bye, hi. Right? So our method takes in two strings, string A, string B. We're going to return a string ultimately. Right? In this example method call, hi is going to come in, and that's string A inside of our method. Bye is going to come in, and that's string B in our method. And we're just going to concatenate these things in order. I showed you in the last one a string variable, and then quickly showed you that the string variable was not needed. The same thing is true here. So I'm just going to jump to that. At the point of return, I'm going to concatenate A plus B, right? In this first method call, A is hi, B is bye. So far, we have hi, bye. I now want to tack on this bye, which is string B, followed by string A. And that should give us what we're looking for. Again, I'm using this as an example. This example assuming that A is hi and B is bye. I'm going to hit the go. And boom, we nailed it again. So that's string concatenation. You just use the addition operator and you can kind of piece together and make new strings. String methods can be called once a string object has been constructed. So once we have a string, we can take it, we can use it, we can call methods. We can use the method selector to instruct a string to call any number of string methods. Here's some examples of some methods that we are actually going to learn. Not all right now, but some. Here I have a string str with the contents hello world. Maybe I want to know what is the length of the string. Maybe I want to get the character at a particular index. Maybe I just want a subsection of the string or a substring. Okay, with each of these, notice that on the left of our method selector, I have the variable, more precisely the object variable. So I'm taking this string, str, and I'm telling it to perform an action. I am making this string in particular call a method. Okay, why is this important? Well, as we just saw with our coding bat, it's possible to have multiple strings within the same scope. Right? So this is basically selecting the string that you want. In this example, there's only one string, str, but I'm telling that string to perform an action. Get the character at a particular index. We'll talk more about what that is. Get a subsection of that string. Okay? For every action, for every method that a string can perform, you can check out the string API. This is a link in the slides, but I just kind of recommend Googling. Just Google string API. I actually have version 7 linked. Right? We can do string API. Oh, version 7 is the one that pops up first. There is a lot of stuff here. But what I want to show you for now is this method summary. These are all the methods that a string can call. The method is actually over here in this right-hand column, right? charAt is a method that we're actually going to learn. There's code point at, code point before, concat, compare to, right? These are all of the actions, the methods, the commands that a string can do. The way you read this is that we have the method over here, right? This method is called charAt. It takes in an integer, and here they're actually stating the name of it, right? They're going to call it index. The description of this method, it says it returns the char value at the specified index. Over here to the left, this is actually the return type, right? charAt takes in an integer. It returns a char, a single character. Let me look at maybe another one that we're actually going to learn. Index of. We'll learn this eventually. The name of this method is index of. It takes in an integer, which they are calling ch, and is going to return an integer. Interesting. Okay. So that is the string API. Now, there's APIs that exist for almost every Java class that we'll use, right? Scanner has an API. Random has an API. The math class has an API. The string API stands for Application Programming Interface. You don't need to know that. Details all the information one would need to know in order to use string objects. This method, which we're learning right now, here we see a signature. This method is called length. It is declared or defined in the string class. It doesn't take in any parameters, right? No arguments. It does return an integer. Note that it is not underlined. This method is not static. Simply put, what that means is you'll need an object in order to call it. So the above method signature is for the string method length. Notice this is for documentation purpose only. This is not programming syntax. The left-hand side indicates what object or class the method pertains to. The right-hand side details the name of the method along with its parameters and return type. The name of the method is length. If a method requires additional information in the form of parameters, arguments, I think of them as inputs, the parameter types will be indicated in the parentheses. Here, the parentheses are empty because length can be called without any additional information, any additional parameters. The right-hand side of our colon indicates what data type we expect this to return. Simply put, length is the number of characters in a string. All right, here's some examples. I'm creating a string str with the value test. I'm creating the string hello with the value hello world. Right? A little bit later, I'm doing systemout.println str.length. Notice in this example, we actually have two strings in this context, in this scope. Right? So when I say str.length, that's a string up here. We get back a value of 4. Right? I'm asking, what is the length of str? Here I'm asking, what is the length of hello? How many characters does it have? 13. I like this example because if you actually count this out, right? Space is a character, right? This punctuation is a character. That is part of its length. Hello world has a length of 13. That may be, I'd make a mental note of that one. Okay, that's it. Okay, charAt is the next method that we're learning. It returns a character at the specified index in the string, right? So in the string class, this method exists, charAt. It takes in an integer, is going to return a char, a character. Once again, notice it's not underlined. charAt can be used to obtain an individual character in a string. In order to call charAt, additional information is needed. In this case, right, we're taking in an integer. There's a parameter. There is an argument. It is an int. When called, charAt will return a char, the character at the specified index in this string. In order to understand methods such as charAt, and in a future video we'll talk about substring, it helps to think of strings as an array or a list of characters. Right? So we're going to take hello world as an example and lay it out, each character in its own individual space. Each character of the string occupies an index in the character array. Let's number these indices, right? So let's take hello world and let's assign numbers to it. But be careful, in most modern day programming languages, the numbering of these indices begins at 0 and not 1. Okay, this is going to be really annoying to you at first. This idea that the first index is 0. Eventually, you're going to learn to love this, and you're going to hate the other way, right? The idea that the first index is 1 is actually going to cause you more headaches believe it or not, starting the first index at 0 actually makes this stuff easier in the long run. So keep that in mind. We have hello world laid out. We've numbered effectively. We've effectively numbered the characters. I have this string here, greeting, right, with that exact same contents, hello world. If I go into greeting and I want the character at index 7, well, this is easy. It's this one right here, capital W. Okay, let's try some of these other ones. Here I'm creating a string called sale, and it has the value soil, dirt cheap. Okay, I'm going to go through each of these, but now might be a good spot to pause, kind of self-check. Sale, charAt 6. Well, that's easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But whoa, what do we just see? Our first index is not 1, it's actually 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This first one, right, we're going to go into sale, get the character at index 6. That should be a lowercase d. This one here, the character at 0, capital S, that one's easy. All right, charAt 10. Well, if this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's a space. Space is a character. Okay, charAt 16. If this is 10, we got 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, the exclamation mark. And charAt 17. Uh-oh, there is no charAt 17. Okay, that would give us an error. So here are our answers. One thing I'd like you to note is that we got single quotes around these. Take a look at our string. It has double quotes. Yet here, these things have single quotes. This is a string literal, right? The double quotes. This is a string literal. This is a character literal. Keep in mind, I said that charAt returns a character, right? That is the output, is a single character. If we put double quotes around here, it's technically a string at that point, right? If I'd said double quotes D, that is a string. It's a string with a length of 1, but it's still a string. All right, let's talk about this one down here, charAt 17, which should give us an error. This above code fragment will generate an index out of bounds exception because index 17 does not exist in the string sale. So this is going to generate an error because we go out of bounds. This is literally the error message you'll get. Well, it'll say string index out of bounds exception. All exceptions are runtime errors. What does that mean? There's no syntax error here, right? We're going in the string. We're trying to access a particular index. Syntactically, 17 makes sense. This error does not occur until you actually run the program. So IntelliJ is not going to catch this, right? Because syntactically, that makes sense, right? In the same way that like dividing by 0 syntactically makes sense. Index out-of-bounds exceptions are runtime errors that occur when attempting to access an index that does not exist. In strings, an index out-of-bounds exception will occur if you attempt to access a negative index. So note that we could put like a -1. That's like somewhere over here. That's out of bounds. Or an index that is greater than or equal to the length. What do I mean? Let's go back to this graphic, right? I told you earlier, you should keep in mind that the length of hello world is 13, right? This string has a length of 13. But notice if I try to access an index 13, we're out of bounds. That's what this is saying. Any index that is greater than or equal to the length is out of bounds, period. End of story. Okay. Let's kind of tie this in, right? We've learned 2 methods. We've learned length. We've learned char. We're going to combine those ideas. We're going to look at some code, or we're going to write this code in IntelliJ. Write a program that prompts a user to enter a string, then prints the string vertically. That is 1 character per line. For example, if the user entered the string fox, the program would print FOX. Cool. All right. I got IntelliJ. I'm ready to go. I'm going to go to File, New, Project. I'm going to go next. I'm going to go next. And I need to switch folders. I'm going to jump to my principles folder. And I'm going to make the subfolder CharPerLine. I'm going to right click on the SRC, make a new Java class. I'm going to call that charPerLine. Okay, let's go ahead and plug in our main method with PSVM. And our program is talking about using scanner, so we need to actually bring in scanner. I'm going to jump straight to step 2 of implementing scanner. I'm going to start to type it out. The IntelliSense is going to kick in. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to import for us automatically. I'm going to create a scanner. I'm going to call it input. And that's a new scanner that reads from system.in, the keyboard. Okay, so our next step, we've imported scanner. We've created our scanner object. We need to actually prompt the user. I'm going to use an sout to do that. Please enter a string. One thing I would consider doing is maybe telling them what the program does. This program prints a string vertically. And I'm thinking I'm going to use a print here instead of a print line. That way, whenever they enter their string, it's going to appear next to this prompt. Okay, so when our program starts, we'll tell them what we are doing. We'll create our scanner object. We'll prompt them for the string. Our last step here in implementing scanner is actually capturing that, saving it into a variable. So I'm going to create string str, and it's going to be input.next. Okay, it's been a while, but when we first got introduced to scanner, I told you that next line is a possibility as well. Both of these methods will allow you to get a string. We're actually going to demonstrate what the difference is in just a moment, but there is a slight difference between next and next line. We'll use this to capture the next string, save it into str. So at this point, whatever the user entered, it's now in my program. It's in the variable str. What we're wanting to do is print this string vertically. Now keep in mind, it's a variable string, right? The user could enter anything. I don't know exactly how long it is, but I can find out how long it is. I can use the length method. All right, length will tell me how long it is. So whatever the user enters, it gets saved into str. I can then just say str.length. Why don't we try printing this off, right? So I'm going to do an sout on str.length before we continue. I'm going to right click in free space, tell it to run. This program prints a string vertically. Please enter a string, Fox. Ooh, I get a 3. I'm going to run it again. And let's do hello world. 6. That didn't sound right. Okay. So with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and touch on the difference between next and next line. Why don't we bring in the next line and enter the exact same input, and maybe that'll tell us the difference. Oh, I got 13 whenever I did next line, but only 6 whenever I do next. Here's the difference between the two. Next line gets everything. Next is going to get everything up to the first space. Technically, it's everything up to the first white space, so like a tab, I think, would throw it off. I could be wrong on that. So what we would say is that next gets the next token. A token is just a fancy word for word. Okay, so what do I mean? Did I really enter? Oh, very close. I was just like fat fingering a number and almost had the exact same number. All right, I'm using next, and then I'm going to get this. All right, I'm going to hit enter, and you see it has a length of 6. That's because all we're actually getting is everything up to the space. The reason we use the word token is because this isn't a word, right? It's effectively a word. Whenever I enter hello world, we are getting hello up to the comma, up through the comma, I should say, right? HELLO is 5, and then the comma is 6. So we're getting everything up to the space. But because this consists of punctuation, numbers, we say token. So next is getting the token, the first token, everything up to the space. Okay. Next line, however, gets the entire line. So I could enter something with multiple spaces, and it's going to get all of it, right? This has a length of 45. So that is the difference between next and next line. Okay, I'm going to use next line for this particular program, but just as a kind of comment here, I'm going to put input.next. Maybe I'll say input.next gets the next token. All right, so we're seeing our length method in action, right? The user is entering something. Right now, I'm just printing off how long it is. So I want to print the individual characters, each on a line. In the case of Fox, I'm going to do 3 characters. In the case of I could enter something with multiple spaces, I'm going to do 45 potential characters, right? It's based on length. So it doesn't matter what the user enters. I could always ask how long is it by using the length method. Okay, why is this important? I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we're going to basically finish out our program. You could use length in combination with your for loop to effectively loop through the string. We're going to loop through this string one character at a time. I've entered a for loop, and I use the IntelliJ shortcut syntax. Let me back that up. For I, we'll plug in our header. We have the opportunity to rename I. I'm going to keep it, but we do need a length. Importantly, I've highlighted it here. I is starting at 0. That's actually super sleek. That's actually what we want, because keep in mind, the first index of a string is 0. So I is going to start at 0, and we'll say as long as I is less than str.length. I actually don't need this SOP up here anymore, so we'll just comment that out. So here is a pretty standard loop. We're creating a counter variable, and this counter variable is going to perform str.length number of iterations, right? It's starting at 0. It's going to increment by 1, and if it's still less than the string length, we can do something. So using a for loop in the length of the string, we can create a loop that'll loop str.length number of times. Will iterate str.length number of times. What do I mean? If we enter, I could enter something with multiple spaces, that has a length of 45. This loop will loop 45 times. That's good for us. What we're going to do with each iteration is print off the current character. What do I mean by the current character? I mean the character at index I. charAt is another method that we learned. We're going to go into this string, str, at index I. I is a variable, but it is an integer. If we look at our charAt signature, right, it takes in an integer. It doesn't care if that's a literal, like 7, or a variable, like I. We're going to go into str at this index and retrieve the character. Initially, I is 0, so we'll get the character index 0, but then I would increase and it's 1. And so we would get the character at index 1, the character at index 2, and we'll go through the entire string that way. So this is actually it. This is charPerLine. Right, let's test this out. We'll use our test case that was in the slides. I'll enter Fox and FOX. I'm going to try hello world. And there's hello world. Okay, let's plug in Fox again real fast. The user enters Fox. We save that into str. We're now here. We create I. It has a value of 0. So we're going to go str charAt 0. That's an F. So the F gets printed, and we're using a line. So the next thing that gets printed would appear on the next line. I++, I is now 1. We'll ask, is 1 less than 3? It is. So we'd enter the loop. We'd go into the string at index 1. That's this O. The O gets printed on its own line. We do an I++. I is now 2. We'd go into the string at index 2, which 2 is less than 3, by the way. We would go in the string at index 2. That's an X. We'd print off the X. We do an I++. I is now 3. We would ask, is 3 less than 3? No. We would stop there, and that's good because if we did one more iteration, right, I'm going to say I is less than or equal to string.length. And if I enter Fox, notice that we get a string IndexOutOfBounds exception. It actually tells us right here. We tried to access an element at index 3, and that is out of bounds. Right? Simply put, that last iteration, we do an I++, I becomes 3. We would ask, is 3 less than or equal to 3? We would enter the body and try to get the character at index 3, and that is what's pushing us out of bounds. What I'd like you to notice is that IntelliJ is not mad at me. There are no red squigglies. This thing goes out of bounds, but syntactically, charAt takes integer. There's nothing wrong with trying to access index 3, not until we actually run the program, right? Whenever I actually execute the program, that is when the error occurs. The exception, it is a runtime error. Okay, with that, this is a pretty good stopping point. I'll see you in the next one.